Rain lashed against the ground, turning the village road into a thick, clinging slurry. Mira knelt in the mud, her breath hitching as the cold water soaked through her skin. She swept aside a layer of decaying leaves and saw it. A silver slipper, half buried, its surface catching the faint, flickering light of the storm. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and pried the object from the earth. The moment her touch made contact, the metal pulsed. It felt impossibly warm, a stark contrast to the biting wind. A low, rhythmic hum vibrated from the arch of the shoe, traveling up her arm and settling deep in her chest. She stood slowly, the mud sliding away from her boots. The air around her shifted. A sudden, brilliant white light erupted from the silver surface, cutting through the gloom of the storm. The rain seemed to stop mid-air, held back by the expanding glow. Mira stared down at her foot as the light intensified, casting long, sharp shadows against the dark, hungry village surrounding her. The hum grew louder, a steady heartbeat beneath the chaotic roar of the wind. The light formed a steady, shimmering arc, and from the center, a voice drifted through the rain. It was clear, detached, and absolute. "Make one kind wish," the air resonated. Mira looked toward the village, where the houses stood huddled and dark, their chimneys cold. Her mind flickered with the promise of easy things. She could ask for gold to fill a heavy purse. She could ask for fine silk to replace the rags she wore. These thoughts pulled at her, a whisper of comfort that could end her own struggle in an instant. She looked down at the silver surface, then back at the rows of empty, silent huts. The hunger of the village was a physical weight, a collective ache she had lived with for years. She took a breath, the cold air stinging her lungs, and cast aside the images of wealth. She stood tall, her posture firm despite the shivering in her limbs. Her voice rang out, steady and sharp against the backdrop of the storm. "I wish for food for every table in this village." The air held its breath, waiting for the consequence of her words. The wish hung in the air, vibrating until the silver slipper ignited. A rhythmic, golden glow pulsed from the metal, intense and steady like a beating heart. The light did not merely shine, it expanded, rushing outward in a liquid wave. It poured over the fields, soaking into the dry, cracked earth. Where the gold touched, the mud vanished, replaced by solid, clean ground. The light climbed the walls of the huts, washing over the weathered thatched roofs and sealing the gaps in the wood. It felt as if the entire village were being breathed upon by a warm, living force. Mira watched as the golden tide surged past her, illuminating every corner of the path she had walked in darkness only moments before. The village, once hungry and cold, was now bathed in a soft, humming radiance. She began to walk home, her boots striking the ground with a lightness she had never felt. The storm had retreated, leaving behind a silence that felt heavy with promise. Every step she took left a faint trail of light that lingered on the path behind her. She reached her hut, the door already glowing with the same golden warmth that had transformed the fields. The transformation was complete, and the village waited in the golden quiet for the morning to arrive. The first light of dawn brought a sound the village had not heard in years. It was not the hollow moan of the wind, but the sharp, rhythmic creak of wooden doors swinging wide. Families stepped out of their huts, eyes wide, staring at the impossible. On every threshold stood baskets overflowing with fresh, steaming bread, mounds of golden rice, and crisp, sweet fruit. A murmur began to ripple through the square, growing into a roar of disbelief. Fingers pointed toward the humble hut at the edge of the path. The realization hit them like a physical blow. They had ignored her, turned their backs, and left her to the cold. Now, they stood before the bounty of her kindness. A silence fell as they gathered their own meager offerings, bowls of stew, bundles of dried herbs, and handfuls of wildflowers. They moved as one toward her door, their pace slow and heavy with regret. Mira opened the door and stepped into the light. Before she could speak, the first man dropped to his knees, then another, then the rest. They bowed their heads, their voices overlapping in a chorus of apology. The pride that had once kept them apart shattered in the morning air, leaving only the weight of their gratitude. From that morning, the village changed. When Mira walked the main path, the villagers no longer looked away. They cleared the stones from her way and invited her to share the warmth of their fires. She became a fixture of the community, a steady presence in the daily rhythm of work. Every time she handed a fresh loaf of bread to a neighbor or used her hands to mend a torn coat for a child, the silver slipper beneath her hem reacted. It emitted a soft, pulsing light that rippled through the fabric. It glowed like a heartbeat, steady, bright, and constant. Mira walked through the village, her shadow dancing against the stone walls as the silver light guided her steps toward the next person who needed help. There was no more hunger in the village, and there was no more silence born of isolation. The golden glow from that first morning had faded, but the silver pulse remained, a quiet reminder of the choice she had made. She walked forward, the light rhythmic and sure, anchoring the community in a new, shared peace. The heartbeat of the village was no longer in the wind or the soil, but in the simple, consistent acts of kindness that lit the path ahead for everyone.